your professor. I may be a little tilted here, but I want to just do a little recording of the course. It's a brand new one that I've just designed. So if you look on the screen here, you can see how I've set it up. Some of the things in the very end of the course I haven't tweaked enough because I have more articles to load, things like that. But generally, when you look at the very beginning of this week, you're only the second day in, you'll see the beginnings module, not week one, but this is part of week one, about defining what is modernism, because the course is called Modern Art, Modern and Contemporary Art and Culture. So we're going to be looking at all the ideas, the images, the artists, and the ideas that modernity entails. It's a way of understanding what changed from like the early to mid 1800s with the realism period, which is where we start, all the way till today. So what changed that? So that's what you're going to be studying this 8 weeks. What makes the work of art modern? In my master's degree, that was the question that I worked with to write that. And I chose to identify that as to be all the way back to Da Vinci, because he was certainly a modern, that's where the word Renaissance man came from. Somebody who's really kind of speaking for his own environment. He was very much into science and many of those things, if you've studied that before. This is a little bit different. Most historians say modern art happened in the 1930s. Some, it can be a little bit flexible, but basically it's the idea that we're more expressing our own expressions, our own culture, our own environment through artwork of some kind. Literature, music, all of them usually go together. And a lot of times, like in around the Impressionists, mid 1860s, something like that, a lot of the artists were gathering together weekly in Paris, and from wherever they came from. So you're looking at some of the images here. This one on the left, the scream, you will no doubt recognize that. That's a Norwegian modern, postmodern, post-impressionism artist. He's one of the really great ones, and he came from Norway, which is kind of odd. Most of them were from France proper, especially Paris. But this one is very recognizable, and this is a really good example of the modern. He called this the primal scream, anxiety, that kind of thing. And that is modern people try to express what is predominant in their culture at that time, whatever time period that's in. And all artwork speaks, the great stuff speaks to the time in which we are living and the time in which that particular piece was created. This is the other one, a good example from 1951. Jasper Johns, he's one of my very favorites. This was an amazing piece. He did this, and he also did the American flag. And he got a lot of people angry to paint the American flag in really thick, waxy kind of paint and oil paint. They thought it was really disrespectful of the flag. But when you study his work and the time period in which it was created, which was the Cold War, those issues about America and our enemy, Russia, was very much at the forefront. And that's what he was talking about. This symbolizes, depending on who you are, the atom bomb and the centrifugal blowout that it makes happen, and also a target. He's calling it a target because I was raised in the 50s, and people were talking about that to us, that we were a target because of the atom bomb, and that we could have, that it was kind of an anxiety that this was a possibility now in our innocence. Now, the very first parts here, the textbook, you need to get it right away if you don't already have it. This is, you're only using half of it. Probably about half. There are sections. This is a global art book, but I don't teach the other ethnic areas like Africa, Asia. It's basically based in Europe and America and Mexico. So what you need here, and I've had this scanned, the introduction, that will help you write your first essay because it gives you some of the terminology. Here's another one, the terminology of art. So let's look at that one. The artistic process. So understanding how the knowledge of these terms help you understand the process. Here's some steps: imagining, planning. This is what artists do. Presenting. And these are the basic core ones. You can look at online and see all kinds of maybe additions to this, but these are the main ones. Just simply things like shape, form, color. Value. Value is the darks and lights that you use very effectively. Texture. How you handle space in a composition, even if it's a sculpture or a monument. The principles of design. Does something balance out? You'll see abstract work that is non-representational, which means it doesn't represent anything that's specific. You can't recognize anything like an image, a person, an animal, so, or a story. So do those shapes still have some kind of balance? And some of them don't on purpose. So it's really complex how you study art. It also has a lot to do with the artists themselves, and you'll be learning a lot about them also. Emphasis, what's the focal point of something? You'll be seeing stuff in here where it's obvious that there's something light shining on something really brightly, and that sort of gives it the focal point. Contrast is a really huge thing. It's one of my favorite things to have something contrast darks and lights against each other. So those are some of the ideas. Line, tons of things about line. Here's a Jackson Pollock. How line, when you look at an artwork, once you study this in this course, you're going to be very aware of these elements. This is very much made up of line. Shapes. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but this gives you the idea. I've also got lots and lots of links in here. Here's one that this might have references to other courses, even with other schools. But if you hear that, the information is still the same. Why do we make art? What's its purpose? Announcements, here's the syllabus. So this is something you need to look at right away. Oh, this should be taken out. This is possible. We are using this. This was for the when I was having it approved. Let's see, the content. We start with realism about 1840s, somewhere around there, and go all the way through postmodern artwork and artists. You can see all these different terms: abstract expressionism, neo-Dada. Back here there is Dada itself, and then this was the new Dada. Sometimes they'll do that. Pop art in different places. Conceptual art, what is that? Some of this stuff is going to irritate you, to be sure. Some of it is so out of the norm and the scope, and it's just ideological, intellectual type ideas that make up something. I saw one work that was a little piece of rope, like marine rope, just tied in a regular knot and hammered on the wall, and that was the work of art. That's what drives people crazy. So here's a pretty simple setup here of the 8 weeks, and this is a writing intensive course. So I was teaching the other kind, and this has just been bumped up with length of things and points. The amount of reading is fairly reasonable, but that means that even though these are the required, I want you to go through all links, all documentaries, videos, and PDFs, all of them. I'm going to try to go through maybe a couple of them, like one each week, like a PDF, so that you're not just looking at the pictures, but I can put things into context. So there's not a lot of chapters. It's 27 through 32. And then the last two, week 7 and 8, there was so much in there that I needed to use like half of the chapter the first week and half the second week. But this is where we really get real about the world in which we live today. This is the postmodern, where the concept of censorship, it's been going on actually since the 60s and 70s, mostly the 70s and 80s, where there were forces trying to not have things shown and kind of backlash with that, court cases. It's the idea of what is obscene. Social issues are a huge thing in the last decades. They're getting more and more into all the different things you hear about today. Feminism, like the Me Too movement, that changed art for women. But artists around the world too. We look at some art from India, and I'm talking about contemporary art. Traditional Indian art is something that you're probably familiar with, the gods and goddesses. But the new stuff, not just from India, but really exciting stuff in the Middle East, Iran, Iraq. Many of those have moved to another place or the United States, and they're practicing because they can't practice what they want to do, express what they want in an oppressed, repressive regime. And so they come here. So this is just a few of them. Black artists, every ethnicity, all people of color, everything that everyone is doing is current. It just tells you here the amount of points, what each one's worth, how many there are. The essays, you have 7, because there's week 7, you're going to be submitting your 5 to 10 page paper. So I just left out an extra essay in there. So that's hopefully, if you have any questions, let me know right away. And that includes anything. I'm here to answer your questions. I check email on every day, usually twice a day, to catch any questions. And then probably only once, maybe Saturday morning. You turn things in on Mondays, so if there's any pressing questions, I might check Sunday afternoon, depending on where I'm at. But Monday morning is Monday night is when you are submitting work for the week, so you get that extra day, sort of. So this is where we start. Romanticism was before realism, so we're mainly concentrating on this period. Also the brand new photography, and this is actually late. 1870 was when things were really rolling. The first actual images were around 1826, something like that. So it's very exciting to have a new medium involved. But this is the difference between this Romantic period, including the music and literature, big time. And then Courbet comes in 1849, and he's painting peasants, which people did not like. So it changed everything from fantasy, historical drama, kings, noble people, and religious paintings, to all of a sudden like real life. That's the big difference here. That's why I started it there. The first, you have a discussion. I think many of you have already started, just introducing yourself, and then what kind of art, looking through these chapters that you particularly like and are interested in. And it's always interesting to me to see how somebody changes their minds about, like, or not their minds, but actually changes their perception of what is interesting to them. Like they may have not liked pop art or conceptual art, and then at the end of the course, you're like, well, I really like that, because you've learned about it. This is the first essay, and I love this essay. This is to get you really into the idea of beauty, because I'm just talking about peasants. People didn't want the people who were buying work they were usually wealthy, and they didn't want to see pictures, artwork done of the people who were working on their own land. There's a sense of guilt there. And so that's why it took a while for this. I mean, Courbet couldn't sell anything for a long period of time. But what I'm asking you to look at now is the cult of ugliness that he was accused of starting. You're also going to be delving into those elements and principles when you decide on what's going on with this particular, the Stonebreakers, which is the picture in that module. And then you're going to be talking about what is beauty. There are people who, you'll see things later during World War I, when artwork started to become real. It was, artists were from France and Germany especially, were depicting what war looked like. And a lot of people consider that ugly. Artists consider it beauty because beauty means it's the truth. They're trying to express what the truth is. And something that shows some degradation, there's one really great one in a PDF that I'm going to do a recording on, where it's a scratched in portrait, all black and just simply scratched in a really horrific looking line drawing of a face with hair sticking out. And that is considered, to me and others, that's the beauty of that work. It's telling the truth. That's what people look like then. And you'll understand when you see this. So there's this article here to read that kind of describes what aesthetics are and the concept of beauty, how you determine what is and what isn't. And again, if you have questions, always email me. There's a couple of really good, this and this are from the American Vision series that was great. It's old, it's from the late 80s, I think, but he's one of the best art historians that we have. And I like him because he can be a little bit cynical or funny about treating art like it's not so precious, like museum owners do and collectors do. But he's very, very good. And then a couple of other things. I'll do some, there's one on romanticism here. Basically, there's romanticism stuff in here, but we're actually talking about, that's the contrast of the romanticism work. It's very different than realism. And so realism was basically where we're actually starting the modernism part. But it gives you some context. So I've put pictures in most of these, just about what's coming up. There's good old Picasso. Here's nothing in there. I'm still trying to add things here. So if you see anything, any links that don't work, email me immediately and I will go in, and if it can't be fixed, like some of them are just dropped off YouTube, then I'll go find something else that is similar. So anyway, I'm glad you're here. I'm very excited to, St. Martin's was allowed me to design a course. I was teaching the whole survey from prehistoric to today, and it was exciting to just do a course just on modern art. And a lot of it is what you would more be familiar with, like the Impressionists. Most people are familiar with that. Van Gogh, you get to see and study them in more detail than the other courses. Okay, have fun, and I will be watching for your submissions. Thank you.